Acha, we are ready to start.
We are okay. What happened to my screen? Okay.
We can see you, Acha.
Okay. So, dear friends, I wish to welcome all of you to this section of the Paulos Gregorios chair at the Mahatma Gandhi University in Kerala, India. I say these things in detail because I know some friends from outside India are joining, and people who are not familiar with the chair, and particularly the name of Paulos Gregorios. Well, he was a bishop of the Orthodox Church in Delhi, and he passed away in 1996. The university instituted a chair in his name because of his intellectual and academic contributions and involvement in Kerala as well as in Delhi and other parts of India. Well, he is well known globally as an ecumenical leader, but in Kerala in particular, he is known for his interdisciplinary approach to the whole question of knowledge. He is basically trained in philosophy and theology, but he has an amazing grasp of disciplines of science, social sciences, as well as in international relations, etc. So, at the beginning of the Mahatma Gandhi University, he was giving general lectures in some of these areas like international relations, Western philosophy, and so on. So he had a very distinguished career and very well respected in intellectual and in different parts of India and also in other parts of the world. Now, we have chosen a theme, a general theme, something like this, shaping a common future. So we are, as a chair, we are conducting lectures, seminars, and academic activities in all areas which are of interest to Paulos Gregorios. The shaping of the common future was a main concern for him because all his activities at the world level, at the national Indian level, in Kerala, they were all directed to achieving the goal of uniting humanity as one body. So, shaping up is a very significant theme, particularly in our condition. You have the theme, the face of the other, on which Dr. Ucko will very soon speak. Well, we should acknowledge that all that humanity has achieved in terms of a great civilization is being set aside by new conflicts and wars in different parts of the world. So the face of the other is essentially a face that we encounter every day. And that face can be very expressive. It can express fear or trust, love or hate, or depression or elation, friendship or hostility, and so on. So, discovering the authentic faith of humanity, the human individual, human persons, and humanity as one body is of crucial importance in our world condition today. And that's why we have requested Dr. Ucko, who has always been a keen student of the philosopher Emmanuel Levinas to speak on that. Let me introduce the chair and the speaker in a very few words. Dr. M.B. Mathai is a well-known Gandhian, and most of us know that he was a former director of the School of Gandhian Thought in Mahatma Gandhi University. And he is also editing the prestigious journal Gandhi Mark, The Way of Gandhi. And he is continually is involved in Gandhian studies and research, and he is a sought after speaker and writer. So, welcome, Professor Dr. M.B. Mathai, to chair this session. And Ucko is also well known to many of you. Essentially, he is interested in interfaith dialogue because he was in the World Council of Churches dealing with that area. And he had a very distinguished career in terms of interfaith relations in Nordic countries, in Geneva, in Japan, in USA, and so on. So I have already given a little note about his profile in the notice sent you. So I don't go into the detail. And he has very good relations with India. He took his doctorate degree from the Srinagar University, and he has many friends in India. And he is also very is a deep lover of India, I would say. So Hans Ucko, personally for me, was a long-time friend and colleague in the World Council of Churches in Geneva. So I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Hans Ucko to be the chief speaker. Welcome. And now I request Dr. M.B. Mathai to say a few words in the speaker.
Father, can you hear me?
Yes, it's okay. Yes.
For I'll stop the video so that there will be no breakdown of the system. I think there's some problem with my equipment.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, quite okay. Quite okay.
Friends, I'd like to thank Dr. Father Cain George for inviting me to be the moderator of this important lecture and discussion on a very relevant topic, the face of the other, by a distinguished scholar, Dr. Hans Ucko, who has just been introduced to us by Father George. As moderator, I will limit myself to a very few observations. Participants who are familiar with contemporary Western philosophy would easily recognize that the topic of today's discussion, the face of the other, is the core component of the philosophy of Emmanuel Levinas, who considered ethics as first philosophy. As if I understand it correct, Levinas also argued that it is when we face other human beings, that is, see the face of the other, that we become aware of our responsibility to others, and thus we become ethical or moral. What I consider important for me as a student of Gandhi's philosophy and as a Gandhian activist is that I could discover visible and not so visible commonalities in the philosophies of Gandhi and Levinas. Just as Levinas theorizes, it was the face-to-face encounters that Gandhi had with living human beings that made him ethically or morally responsible and converted him to an activist, whom in India we call a karma yogi. In other words, what Levinas theorized, Gandhiji actualized. I don't want to extend my remarks, introductory remarks further, but would like to reiterate what Father George has already mentioned, that there will be a discussion come Q&A on the conclusion of Ucko's lecture. Now to Dr. Ucko. Sir, kindly take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I trust that you hear me.
Yes.
It looks like it. So first of all, a word of gratitude to the Mahatma Gandhi University in Kottayam, the organizers, my former colleague and friend of many years, Dr. K.M. George, and anyone present at this lecture. I was for some 20 years the program executive for interreligious relations and dialogue and of the World Council of Churches in Geneva. And this is the background when I today address the face of the other. The face of the other is there, visible or not, when through encounters, meetings, and dialogues, two or more people with different religious or non-religious traditions interact. When I am involved in interreligious dialogue, the other interests me. I wonder who he or she is when we are next to each other. And when we have said goodbye, I ask myself who I am when meeting the other, before, during, and after we've met. Member churches in the World Council of Churches, more often than not, perceived interreligious dialogue as something threatening the cause of mission. It was considered controversial. The loss of mission and the risk of syncretism were more on the minds of many Christians. Today, interreligious relations and dialogue have a rationale also outside the realm of religion, with a role to play as a possible instrument towards living in peace without fear. Being retired comes with a substantial bonus. You represent only yourself. What you try to convey is built upon your own experiences, what you have read, people you've met, situations you've been into, and where you have been able to extract some learnings for yourself. The theme of the Mahatma Gandhi University, Shaping Our Common Culture, puts this lecture in context. Most of us realize that our time does not manage very well the resources that we have in a way that creates a culture of peace and living together in dignity. Values which we thought were intrinsic to our culture, society, and even world seem absent, do not count, or are less considered. A common culture is certainly needed, although we don't know how to define it and what it would contain or what would be demanded by us. We could maybe have a vision of a culture for all, but the way how to get there is unknown. We know one thing: it won't come by itself. It would be easier if we could have a common culture based only on how it may have been, using yesterday's framework, but we know that this is not possible and wouldn't work. Because people have had culture thrust upon them because they lost, were occupied, and had to yield to the ruling empire, and it became the common culture because there was no viable alternative. Colonialism established common cultures, but it was received under duress by those who were at the losing end. Western culture is present more than in the West. Some aspects are global and present, also in parts of the world anxious not to be seen close to the West, but as far away as possible from it, such as today's Russia and China. Nevertheless, Western culture has entered the world and has entered the normal. The West succeeded in establishing its culture, and this is now, to a certain extent, part of our being, for better or for worse, whether we like it or not. English is the lingua franca, and Coca-Cola is everywhere. Heritages of social norms, ethical values, traditional customs, belief systems, political systems, and technologies have origins in Western culture. But the Western culture was built upon a power relationship with an inbuilt order taken for granted or accepted willy-nilly. But there is in our time increasingly a protest against Western culture and civilization. And the West is, in this respect, to some extent in defeatist mode. It is difficult to say whether we witness the beginning of an erosion or implosion. The title of the very recent book by French historian Emmanuel Todd is La défaite de l'Occident, the defeat of the West, which says the same. Society is faced with sudden eruptions previously unknown and now so frequent that they overtake that which we were used to handling. To a great extent, the increasing number of refugees, the spoils of war and conflict, migrants, and people seeking a better future for themselves and their children because the exploitation of resources has gone too far and is hurting the poor. Global warming and the deforestation of the rainforests testify to ecological disasters due to human activity. The world seems at a loss for what to do. People are increasingly asking themselves whether a new culture is possible. You hear often people saying that the values of yesterday seem to be forgotten, but don't know how to deal with it. We know we need a culture that does not marginalize and exclude. We don't know how to. Culture used to change by itself without us noticing it or seeing it until it became a reality and became part of ourselves, and we were breathing it, for better or for worse. Now we know that we must try to correct that which has gone wrong. The writing is on the wall. The breakup of that which used to hold everything together and the inability to plaster over or cover is obvious. Can a common culture be shaped? And who shapes common culture? Where do majorities and minorities fit in? Is there not a need for a new social contract? And by this I mean where people actually agree to give up privileges to protect the rights of all. Are there values which today are void? Can we identify values that correspond to the needs of our time? There is a need for a culture that reflects the present and hints at the future instead of being stuck in the past, where it is becoming increasingly irrelevant. We need another understanding of ourselves and the other, an understanding that is not fixed once and for all, and that reckons with that we as human beings are multidimensional. None of us has only one identity. We each live within multiple identities and influences that morph and move just as we speak. We need each other and not static identity. So has the time come for other dimensions of our identity to be more present? The French-Lithuanian philosopher Emmanuel Levinas said it in the following way: the self is not a being that always remains the same, but a being whose existence consists of identifying itself, of rediscovering its identity through everything that happens to it. When I began working with interreligious dialogue, I had the impression that participants came together more to talk at each other than to talk with each other. Yes, we wanted to explain ourselves. We listened and learned how to mend relations. I was a Christian, you were a Hindu. We had our identity to maintain and uphold. It was important to bring as much as possible of that which was our Christian identity to the table. We focused on only one of our identities, but identity is not an identity once and for all given. The relationship between self and others is context dependent, ever changing, and conditioned by power relationships. Abstract and static understandings of self and others are dangerous. Identity is always multifaceted, composed of many elements, including gender, religion, culture, and nationality. It is important to bring to awareness the hidden and unconscious implications of our worldviews and identities that affect our relationships with others. Those whom we call the others are often our projections and constructions, and these constructions may be different from how others represent themselves. One of the genuine learnings growing out of interreligious dialogue is respecting the right to self-definition and the full dignity of others, an empathetic understanding and acceptance of their self-representations, though difficult, is necessary, because such empathetic understanding becomes a mirror for deeper self-understanding. Religion has been an incomparably creative core of culture throughout all times and all over the world. But religion or culture has rarely made creative sense of other religions, and it still needs, despite religious plurality, as old as religion itself, to reckon with the other as part of the family. One has at best assigned roles to the others, some of them outright hostile, some of them as a way of preparation for the religion that is your religion. Judaism was by Christian theology seen as preparatio evangelica, the preparation for the gospel, and among the three Abrahamic religions, there were temptations to describe the interrelationship between the three as part of a three-stage rocket to providing propulsion consecutively to achieve orbital velocity. The first stage of the rocket was Judaism, the second Christianity, and the third and final stage, Islam. There's been a temptation in religion to identify itself as self-sufficient, unperturbed by the other as a significant other. And yet, people of different religions have been able to live together and see each other as neighbors. The crux became apparent when one was to define oneself and others. Religion is not an island, but has most often defined oneself and others as if one didn't see or recognize the other, and if so, mostly as an opposite and rarely as a counterpart. It has some difficulty seeing the other as a vis-a-vis. When looking upon interreligious dialogue, you easily end up seeing yourself and the other as if you were dressed up for contest, combat, or enduring dispute. You are the Christian, he is the Hindu, you are the believer, he is the agnostic or atheist. It is as if you are all part of a drama where each one of you has been given permanent roles and where identity is absolute. A saying by the Kotsker Rebbe a Hasidic rabbi and leader, has accompanied me throughout my reflections on self and others. This is the saying, listen carefully, if I am I, because I am I, and you are you, because you are you, then I am I, and you are you. But if I am I, because you are you, and you are you, because I am I, then I am not I, and you are not you. On the one hand, this is how it should be. We have, or should have, our integrity. We are unique. We should not fall prey to conditioning ourselves on the doings, thinkings, actions, and being of the other. I am I, because I am I, and you are you, because you are you. But there is a risk that I think that I can become I without you. I can never become I unless you are you and inherently present. I cannot be without the other, and the other cannot be without me. When I see myself in the mirror, I also see the other. To be an individual is to be in relation to the other and the otherness of the other. Our time suffers from an inflated individualism which contradicts what it means to be in a plural world. Paul Nitter writes in No Other Name that, and I quote, truth will no longer be identified by its ability to exclude or absorb others. Rather, what is true will reveal itself mainly by its ability to relate to other expressions of truth and to grow through these relationships. Truth defined not by exclusion, but by relation. The new model reflects what our pluralistic world is discovering. No truth can stand alone. No truth can be totally unchangeable. Truth, by its very nature, needs other truths. If it cannot relate, its quality of truth must be open to question. It is precisely concerning religious plurality that we are brought into the enigma of who we are, because religious plurality may or will contradict our truth claims or convictions and oblige us to rethink, reconsider, and reformulate, unless, of course, we choose to put on blinkers. The other is a challenge. Most of the time, we don't see the face of the other. We cover his face, with the consequences of our words and concepts, ideologies, principles, creeds, and dogmas. We reduce the other into a function, and place him or her into a category, oblige him or her into a role, where at the end station, a number is tattooed towards the way to destruction. I began studying philosophy in my youth, looking for a framework for making ethical decisions and for exploring questions about life and death, meaning and purpose. It seemed to me that philosophy opened doors and there was always a way out. Now, in my old age, I return to philosophy and its ability to push open windows where new paths appear. I return to a philosopher of my youth, who has already been mentioned, the French-Lithuanian philosopher Emmanuel Levinas. When Levinas died in 1995, Le Monde called him in an obituary the most secular of religious men and the most religious of secular men. It suited me then, and it suits me now. His most important contribution was thinking on the issue of the individual's infinite responsibility for the other. The philosophy of Levinas is based upon the significance of the other both as God, whom I don't see, and the other whose face I see. He said, firstly, there is the straightness of the face, its directness, its defenselessness. The skin of the face is at its most naked and defenseless. The face carries within it a certain poverty. The proof of that is that we try to mask this poverty by assuming poses and attitude. But in the face lies the supreme authority that commands. And I have always said that this is the word of God. The human face is the conduit for the word of God. There is the word of God in the other. The face is meaning, and a meaning without context. I want to say, says Levinas, that the other, within the rectitude of this face, is not an individual in a context. Usually, a person is a character, a professor at the Sorbonne, the vice president of the state council, the son of so-and-so, everything that you can see in a passport, the way one is dressed and presents oneself, and all meaning, in the usual sense of the term, is relative to a specific context. The meaning something has in relation to something else. However, the face gives priority to the self. The other and the face of the other complicate monologues and assertions and are open for other dimensions, and my perception and understanding tentative and intuitive. There is and needs to be much more space for intuition whenever we relate to the other or God. Intuition is the sixth sense. Intuition is the mother of attitude, which is convinced that big, predetermined doctrines and theories must not be projected onto reality, but rather the opposite. Experience should be described by observing reality without recourse to theory, deduction, or assumptions from other disciplines. This is maybe a sign of our time, which more than anything else is characterized by an uneasiness to be locked up in categories. Levinas did not think that one could achieve direct communication with God. A relationship with God is established through the face of the other. His is a philosophy of the other, of transcendence, of ethics, of responsibility, of hospitality. The thrust of his philosophy is his refusal to allow shortcuts, be they intellectual or spiritual, comfort zones, exits to a good conscience in my relationship with God. There is no way around the other, and it is a self-delusion trying to fill the space with formulas and slogans as if everything was settled and cast in stones. Since the other is an intrinsic part of my world, no room can be used as chambre séparée or secluded quarters. The significance of the other, the face of the other, demands something, wants something, and assigns me to something. This, to me, is more than anything else the word of God, much more than a set formula. The word of God is to be seen through the other. Levinas says, I would prefer not defining anything by reference to God. It is the human that I know. When I have anything to say about God, then the point of departure is always human relations. It is not that I refuse the religious term. I adopt it to a situation from where I cannot hide. All I can say comes from a situation of responsibility, which is religious in the sense that I cannot flee from it. I find myself in front of a responsibility which I must face, says Levinas. Our obligations to the other have priority over the obligations to God. Or rather, the other is the very way to the sacred. This is nothing new. I have here at home a calligraphy that the former South Korean president Kim Dae-jung once gave me when I visited him during his long house arrest. It says, "To serve man is to serve heaven." This is the basis of the native religion of Korea, Donghak. The same thoughts are expressed in the parable about the judgment of the nations in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. The only difference is that in more than one sermon on this parable, you get the impression that you should clothe the naked, feed the hungry, not because they are hungry and naked, but because it could be that Jesus is in the hungry and the naked. And I get the impression from these sermons that the hungry, thirsty, and naked matter less than Jesus. A hungry Jesus seems to matter more than a hungry nobody. The hungry and naked serve as a shortcut. The other is objectified. The other is not a channel to God, indicating which highway to take towards God, allowing us, as it were, to leave the other behind once he or she has been fed or dressed. The other remains, and religion does not offer private appointments with a comforting God. It is up to us as human beings to save human beings. The divine way of repairing the misery is not to have God intervene. The real relationship between God and the human being is between human beings when we assume our responsibility as if there was no God. Sneaking away to a tête-à-tête with God alone is a temptation. The only relationship with God is in a ménage à trois, a household with three, God, the other, and I. Levinas reveals and challenges the dehumanization perpetrated by the social sciences. And I would also add theology, which explains away human subjectivity in the name of abstract principles, the intelligible structures wherein subjectivity would have no internal finality. Ethics is, or rather should be, the first aim of a valid philosophy. If we allowed ethics to precede ontology, we would live subject to justice in all the moments of our lives and not be distracted and misled by the unfeeling truth of philosophical or even more theological tradition. If I were to take ethical behavior as my first obligation, as a thinking person, my main concern would be the quality of my relations with other people and my responsibility for each of them. The other must be met face to face without an intermediary, in nakedness, says Levinas, in vulnerability. Levinas turns philosophy upside down in his insistence that it is ethics, not metaphysics, that is the first philosophy. So that being in a relationship is much more basic than simply being. And Levinas quotes Alyosha Karamazov in The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, when Alyosha says, "We are all responsible for everyone else, but I am more responsible than all the others." This thought can make us tremble, for we are then endlessly indebted to the other, responsible for the other, and the good takes precedence over the truth. There is no consolation in immediate reciprocity. It may be a loss to carry the other. It is not a given that we will also be carried. But this is the human condition in which we live, or should live. The Danish philosopher and theologian Løgstrup, himself an ethical intuitionist, speaks in his work often about how we as human beings carry the destiny of each other in our hands. We can carry or we can let go of the other. The obligation to the other is absolute and much greater than the obligation to the self. Western humanism sees everything, including the other, through the prism of the self, and thus makes the other no more than another reflection of the self. The notion of the self is not generated by the self. It is given to each one of us by the other. In other words, you do not determine your identity. Your identity comes out of your relationship with the other. And that relationship is characterized by the sense of responsibility each one has for the other. Levinas wanted to remind people of the need to decenter the self if we want to be true to ourselves. The other person is not an extension of the self or a projection of the self. It is not an alter ego whom we could imagine being on the same track as we are, having the same goal or vision. This is not the case. The other is radically other, and it is in this relationship of care for the other that the self becomes a self. There is no given reciprocity or mutuality in Levinas' thinking. My need for the other is not congruent with the need the other may have for me. Were it like this, we would all be waiting for a sign of the other, see how the other moves before we move. But I should acknowledge you, whether you acknowledge me, simply because this is the way life is, or must be to life. As in love, there is the possibility of not being loved in return. It is only by acknowledging you that I come to myself. Who are you? You are not my alter ego. You are that which I am not and which I can never become. You are the one who holds a truth which I have not, which I cannot buy, which I cannot take. The only way for me in life is to stay close to you. The proximity is given not once and for all time. It is changing. There is no symmetry, but there is movement. Truth is not a matter of abstracting to a pure realm of forms or concepts. Symbols, language, culture, and the sense of significance are indeed the home of meaning, no longer to be reduced as obstructions to an ideal intellectual order. Levinas is reluctant to bring God into the conversation. He believes that in our relationship with the other, that is, in the way we live out our responsibility for the other, there is an important and unmistakable element of transcendence. We become more than the sum of our parts, and we encounter in and through the other what he calls the infinite, or the other with a capital O. Levinas wrote that we see in the face of the other the trace of the infinite, of God, no more, no less. And in order not to privilege the face in any way, he added that the whole body, a hand, or the curve of a shoulder, could express the face. And so for Levinas, there could be no knowledge of God separate from the relationship with others. The responsibility for the other is all. When Levinas met opposition to his austere understanding, he pointed out that Moses and the prophets were not worried about the immortality of the soul, but about the poor, the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. He wrote that in adult religion, contact with the divine is not a kind of spiritual friendship, but a task in the economy of justice. His is a religion that demands of its believers a commitment of responsibility for the other and for society in general, unlike those religions that offer childish self-indulgence through spiritual amusements that are devoid of responsibility. Thank you.
Hello,
Hello.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, okay. So, friends who are participating in this program, now the floor is open for discussion. If anybody would like to ask specific questions to our friend, the resource person, they are free to do that. If you have any observations to make, you are most welcome. And therefore, it is time for a discussion and a Q&A. Please come forward. The floor is open and you are most welcome. And I'm sure that our resource person will be responding to them. You can unmute and ask questions or make observations. Thank you.
Can I break the silence?
Oh, sure. Most welcome, Dr. Matthew Kurian. I can see your smiling face.
First of all, I want to express our deep thanks for the very relevant and deep presentation of a topic which has very important current relevance. Thank you for that. I am a student of political economy. So I also think that the whole world humanity cannot go like this in this type of poly crisis. You referred to a number of crises, but unfortunately, as you referred to, in our practical approach, we find ethical missing. So I want to pose a question like this. I may go to Karl Polanyi, The Great Transformation, that book, where he refers to the three levels of human history: pre-capitalism, old capitalism, and new capitalism. And now we are in the new capitalism. You referred to the inhumanity perpetrated all over the world. So my query is, we all seek religion as a savior. But I find in religion two dimensions, the spiritual dimension as well as the temporal dimension. Religion is now got embedded into the political economy. So the task of all of us is how to disembed religion from the political economy, from that power which you referred to, as an organization, not as a spiritual institution, as an organization. And then another dimension also want to get your counsel, how to elevate religion to that level where political economy can be embedded into that religion, that culture, that society which you referred to. Thank you very much for your enlightening talk. I hope you got my point.
Yes, and no, but that had nothing to do with you, but the sound disappeared. But I am not interested in trying to suggest that if we only become more religious, things will solve themselves religiously. I think we need to apply those instruments that we have that under an ethical banner defend justice, oppose oppression of the poor. I mean, such both religious and human, and if you want to, political instruments that serve the cause of those who are suffering. So I'm not saying that, or I tried to communicate, not a new religious emphasis or having some kind of, if we only become more godlike or only become more religious, then things will solve themselves. No, I think we need to use those instruments that we have, but under an ethical banner that, for me, has a certain demand on our priority of the other, and with that as an instrument, devise our political instruments that become less oppressive. So I don't know if this responds to your question. As I said, I didn't hear more than half of it, but I'm not interested in finding yet another, making religion a kind of a reservation at the side of the world and a kind of secluded quarters, but seeing religion, God, the infinite, the divine, and the plight of human beings under the banner of an ethical thrust.
Dr. Matthew Gurian?
Thank you for your response.
Well, Dr. Ucko, I would like to pose a brief question because I don't find the participants coming forward as we expected. You know, you said that we don't, in the beginning of your talk, you made a very important statement, important for me. That we don't use us to build peace or among human beings. We don't use. Did I hear you correct?
And I didn't
Dr.
hear
Ucko?
you, so you have to repeat it because the sound.
No, you
disappeared.
said in the beginning of your
Yes.
presentation that
Mm.
we human beings don't use our resources to build peace.
Mm.
And my question will be, if that is so, my question will be, how can we persuade those who are responsible to use our resources in such a way that it will lead to the building of peace and the creation of a culture of peace for humanity? How can we persuade them?
Mm. Yeah, it's a question that I don't have any answer to, more than that we use in a way that is not self-serving the instruments at our disposal. I don't see that before us is in a democratic landscape that we use the right of our votes, that we argue for a politics that is not self-serving, that we realize that our future, in so many respects, are depending on considerations taken that where we don't immediately see the benefit for us ourselves. And thinking ecologically, that we don't understand, or we have to make more visible and more knowledgeable our context, in the sense that the disaster of the rainforests, for instance, has an immediate repercussion on our well-being. But of course, I don't have a magical wand that from one day to the other changes the situation as it is. It's only that I think we need to realize that we have to talk of systematic change, and not only the change that supports or boosts our group, our political party, and so on and so forth. So I wish I could respond to you much more directly and much more concretely, but alas, I don't have that gift. And if I had, I would be in a different situation than a retired former bureaucrat. Because what we see now is the need not only for diverse things in our own context, but for systemic change that we have seen that, as I said, like the rainforest has an immediate repercussion on our well-being. So I would say systemic change more than the national well-being.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Other friends can come forward, please.
My name is Satish Abraham. I'm from Kottayam. You had mentioned about a new cultural system being formed, apart from what has we been entered with the Western culture. I was just looking at it from a small place like Kottayam in India. How is my word or my theory or my thinking can be heard in a world forum? Example, you are mentioning about the rainforest. See, the Western culture, and you have exploited, if I can use that word, exploited everything from the economic point of view, exploited the the trees and forest produce and natural resources. Now a new rule is coming in, which says, the European rule, which says we produce rubber, natural rubber from this part of the world. And now the new rule says you have to prove that what we use this rubber does not come from a rainforest area. So, I mean, we've been, for centuries, actually, we've been growing rubber here. Now to say there's a restriction or a stipulation which says I must prove that my produce is from a non-destroying rainforest area. That's very difficult. Can I have your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, maybe we have to insist upon, not only in relation to rubber trees or rubber production, that those who will be immediately affected by, in this case, the decrease of rubber production from the rubber tree be compensated. And this I see, at least in some respects, in France recently, there were big protests concerning the use of pesticide, where the agricultural professions said that if you take away or make illegal the use of this particular pesticide that we are using, we will no longer have an agriculture. And finally, through protests and demands, it was decided in the French Parliament that some exception had to be made, although one knows that the pesticide has lethal or disastrous effects on our environment. Yet we need somehow to balance the relationship between those who have their livelihood in agriculture and those who are keen to make sure for the present and the future that no pesticides are used. This is a balance that is very difficult, and it mustn't be looked upon as a concession to those using pesticides. But there needs to be some kind of agreement between those who, through no fault of their own, are need to make this use of this particular pesticide, and those who, for the sake of their survival and the sake of the world. So I think that unfortunately we cannot, although we would like to, as I said before, have a magical wand that solves all problems by saying no to this and no to that, because it has repercussions on those who are serving us what they are producing. So it's not not an easy answer. It's an answer that demands some ethical considerations. And again, if I may refer to France, I've seen the years I've lived here, that there has been at least an attempt to have a local conversation on various levels on issues that were controversial, in order not to present simplistic solutions that may sound nice but are impossible to implement.
Thank you. You have touched upon and probably analyzed it perfectly, but that is exactly my problem. See, my voice to prove that the rubber trees or the rainforests are being sustained very well in this part of the world cannot be presented the way it should be to convince the European Union. That is my problem.
Yeah, I think it's even in other parts of the world and within the European Union itself, there is a balance to be found, but at least that balance is not kind of put that we will say, okay, we'll deal with it somehow in the future. We need to achieve that balance now, and then somehow, one, compensate those who immediately suffers from in this case, than pesticides or the limitations put on rubber production, and those who, with the right that they have, see that a continued limitless rubber production will have devastating consequences for our survival.
Well, we disagree on your last point, but I leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dr. Ucko, can I
Sure.
ask another question to you? You know, when your topic, today's talk, the face of the other, naturally brings to our mind, who are familiar with the philosophy and writings of Sartre. He said, hell is other people. How do you make a comparison between these two statements? The face of the other and hell is other people.
Hell is other people.
Yeah, Sartre said that,
Oh, I see. Right. Yes, now I hear. Well, he may very well have said so. I think it depends on the situation and the context. I think it sounds good, but I think, unfortunately, hell is we and our actions, and there is no particular privilege for other people. We are part of other people. So I find it's catchy, but it doesn't really fathom that we are part of both other people and hell. Now, I don't personally associate myself to hell as a major issue or to be part of my worldview. I think I have no insight into this. I only have an insight into what can be achieved during my lifetime.
Let me ask one question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Bijesh Philip. From your enlightening talk, I got the impression that Emmanuel Levinas emphasized very much a unique, distinctive identity or otherness of others. It seems that he overemphasized the otherness of others. In that sense, others are transcendent. They are beyond our categorization or comprehension. Perhaps this is an attempt to emphasize and highlight the unique dignity of each person. But in this attempt, whether common identity and common culture is getting diminished. You also mentioned in the beginning that we need a common identity. It won't come by itself. So ethics, responsibility, all these things have been highlighted and emphasized by Levinas, but still I doubt whether when he tried to emphasize this unique otherness of others, the commonality and common identity was losing or getting diminished in that process. Because this is a very important mission before us. How can we find out common identity in the midst of conflicts and many issues which we are facing today? Just one more thing. A few years ago, there was a flood in Kerala in 2018, and that issue brought people together beyond uh, all boundaries, caste, creed, religion. We were able to come together and live together in comfortable, secure places, serving each other. So whether these kind of threats which the planet is facing, the whole world is facing, bringing together. Another thing, the concept of divine, that should be the most important unifying identity, and all religions are upholding it and glorifying it, but still religions are becoming instruments of polarizing people. So there is a contradiction in that.
Yeah, as to the last point, that is exactly what I said. I think that religion has, in many respects, not in all, one weakness in that it has often kind of served the own tribe or the own people more than actually looking at the whole situation and kind of objectifying the others. In Christianity, Islam, and I think many religions in different ways, religion has looked upon the other as a potential convert. And that, I think, has been to the detriment not only of the other, but also of the religionist, him or herself, and religion itself. Of course, you can say, if you only hear what, I turn to the other issues, if you only listen to what I now said, Levinas says, he doesn't say so. I mean, if you just turn it around, what he says about the other, or the face of the other, applies to the other as well. I mean, it's only that you have to talk from somewhere, and he talks from his particular place in time. And he was, of course, certainly not he was influenced, of course, by what others, in this case, the Jewish community of his time, said about him, that he was more a disciple of Heidegger, or he was more Christian than Jewish, and so on. So, of course, this will maybe color his emphasis, and should not be generalized. But we always speak from some angle, and the idea that he tries, and I also try to communicate, is what I say as a follower of this or that particular religion should also be something that should apply for the followers of other religions or no religion. That we cannot speak from a place between heaven and hell. We have to speak from a particular place in this time and in this place. But we do not look upon it as only applicable for ourselves, because I can very well understand that people feel that he is overemphasizing this with the responsibility of the other. What about me? I'm also a poor victim of this and that. And he's not saying that it's only the other that matters. You don't matter. But seen from you have to turn it around. Let me give you an example that I think maybe could be helpful. In Kyoto, there is a Buddhist rock garden called Ryuanji. There you have 15 rocks. And when you come to this garden, you see 14 rocks. You don't see 15 rocks. So therefore, you have to go to another angle, and then you will see the 15th rock that you didn't see before. but you won't see all 15 rocks because another rock is hidden. So that is only to say that there is a little possibility that we could just envision everything from one perspective. We have to use several perspectives and be mindful of that we are not triumphalistic in whatever we say.
Okay. Hans Ucko, just a simple question. You know that there is a massive immigration of young people from India, particularly from Kerala, to Western Europe, UK, America, Canada, and so on. No? Well, you live in Western Europe, and you have been facing the problem of immigrants throughout the last few decades. What do you think about the new situation? Would it ultimately create a backlash in Western Europe? Because the incoming immigrants are not all of the same religion or of same culture, you know, this cultural religious conflict. Would it worsen in Western Europe and the Western world in general?
I personally, I think that this is how the world has been more or less throughout history. Mostly, I think that immigrants who have felt the need to leave their home country have become assets in their new country, not only for themselves, but for the society. They have brought issues, values, even to the extent where people have not understood the way they are doing things. It has at least opened up for discussion about what are they trying to say. Let me take an example. People are in the West increasingly asking about values coming out of what is called the Muslim tradition. And it has, when it comes to family values, they have pointed to issues, really serious issues that need to be addressed. But they have also raised a question in the European societies about family. What does family mean? And is there responsibility? Are there particular values that we should cherish? I don't look upon immigration as there are problems. There are problems too in the country where they come to, but there is also a void because they have to leave. Why do they have to leave India? Because they think maybe the future is better elsewhere. And I think it would be also a point for people in Kerala and other places to reflect upon why are they leaving in such droves? What could be done to facilitate their lives where they are? Because we also risk in some countries a brain drain, which is not good at all for the country they leave. But basically, I think my home country has certainly in many ways benefited, Sweden is that, benefited from migrants who needed to leave or who wanted to try other ways of a more economic security for themselves and their children. And I think it has led to something that has been good for Sweden. There are problems, yes, and there are many sad examples of how those who came to their new country were faced with a lack of understanding. And that, of course, has been to the detriment, I think, in the long run for not only the receiving country. But there are problems that we need to deal with because we cannot allow that those who feel the need to leave their country in this case then, for instance, Kerala, that they come to a country where they can risk being exploited. And this has happened because the need has maybe been thus that they have not, may have chosen a way whereby trying to get as much out of the new country as possible without maybe seeing how this new country works and functions. And in some ways, this has been to the detriment also for the immigrant, him or herself.
Matai, so maybe it's time to wind up, because
I think if there are no more questions, we can wind up. Are there any more questions or observations?
Yes. Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Father
sure.
Fred-
Please come forward. Please come forward.
Yes, Dr. Ucko, thank you very much for the very enlightening lecture. I feel from your talk that you are heavily depending on Emmanuel Levinas's philosophy about the face of the other. That's good. Okay. But when I heard your lecture, I was wondering, what is the role of the divine in this? If I can see the other's face as God's face, what is the need for a divine intervention, or even the need of a religion to instruct? So, are you, I'm wondering whether Emmanuel Levinas is replacing religion completely, or he is ruling out religion.
This is a very good question, and this is something that I, in a way, wrestled with. But then my topic was, since I've been studying Emmanuel Levinas, that I should talk about him more. And he is certainly not ruling out, as I said, also the transcendent. And nor do I. And I think there is very much a space. I said talked also about the intuition. I think there are other dimensions with the divine, so to say, than creating a rule set for others. I am more interested in that which seems to be a human capacity. And that is what I would like to call awe, that we are moved in our lives, whether we are religious or not, whether we are Christians or Hindus, agnostics or atheists, that we go through life, and sometimes without being directed or without being told so, we are moved that there is something more than we can actually fathom. This is, for me, how should I say, a divine, something that makes me think, no, Levinas himself is not God. Levinas does not take away God. God, G-O-D, however you want to phrase it, very much exists in our capacity to be moved beyond ourselves. And that, to me, has become increasingly important the older I get, when I see how we are sometimes completely surprised by something that moves us. It could be nature. It could be an event. It could be music. It could be a child. It could be someone touching us and making us understand that I'm not the limit. There is a limitlessness beyond me. And that to me is not all I have to say about religion, but it is certainly saying that there are aspects of the divine or divinity or the numinous, better as a word, the numinous, that I cannot touch, that I can only be influenced by. And in some ways, the French word émerveillement tells me something. Life is full of such wonders that moves me to realize that there is more to it than what I thought. But I can do this in another lecture if you want to.
Thank you, Dr. Ucko. But in my case, seeing the other's face is always, and in many cases, prompted by the religious consciousness or the divine consciousness in me.
Yes. That's what I talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rest is
Can we
silence.
conclude? Can we conclude?
Yes. Father Bijesh will say a word of thanks. Huh?
Okay,
So,
okay. Father
if you-
Rajesh.
Unless you want to make a few comments.
Okay. Dear friends, Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorios chair facilitated this enlightening session today. We all know that a just and peaceful society, a community of communities where dear concerns and dream of Paulos Mar Gregorios Metropolitan. And it is in line with those concerns. Today's talk was also arranged. Dr. Hans Ucko's talk was really an enlightening experience for all of us. He spared his precious time for interacting with us on behalf of all the participants, and also on behalf of especially Father Dr. K.M. George and Paulos Mar Gregorios chair. Let me take this opportunity to express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Hans Ucko. And also we are grateful to Professor Dr. M.P. Mathai for moderating this session in a marvelous manner. In his introduction, he compared Levinas and Gandhian thought. Grateful to Mathai sir. We all know that Dr. Paulos Mar Gregorios chair is organizing a lot of programs, debates, discussions, and the backbone of this chair is respected Dr. K.M. George Father. So he gave a wonderful introduction to today's session. We express our gratitude to Father Dr. K.M. George also. And also let me convey our thanks for the active participation of all of you. Participants from different parts of the world are part of this program. So expressing our sincere gratitude to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have plenty of time, you know, I'm retired, so no need to thank me for setting aside time. Time is the only thing I have left.
Thank you, Hans. So
That's very kind of you.
I hope you will be visiting India again.
Oh, I would love to. I would love to.
So how is Agneta? How is the family?
Thank you. Fine.
How-
All remembering at this time, 5-6 years ago, we spent 3 weeks, children, grandchildren, Agneta and I, in Kerala.
Yeah, yes.
And that was a magnificent and a very good reminder of how much and how dear India is to us.
Okay.
So, and even our driver of those 5 years ago, he comes back to me every now and then and said, time is now of the essence to come back to Kerala. And I am inclined to obey him.
Okay, so thank you, Hans, for this meeting, and we could also bring back to memory some of
Yes,
the
indeed.
things of the past.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's time to call it a day and good night.
Yeah.
Okay.